Hello, WRN Marketing Automation Pilot Program. So today we're going to go over lead scoring rules, visitor ID settings. We're going to take a look at visitor IDs, and we're going to take our first step into marketing automation. Yes, the real thing. So let's jump in with lead scoring rules and see what that's all about. To go there, go to settings and down to features and lead scores. So what does lead scoring mean? You can look over your contacts and get a visual representation of who is more likely to buy, who's more likely to convert, and which of your contacts are more dedicated customers. We do that by essentially giving them points based on their interactions with us. We're going to ignore this top part for just a moment, take a look at the rest of this, and then circle back to it, so that way it's going to make more sense. The first part of scoring leads is completeness. So in the previous workshop, we talked about creating forms. Now, all these points that are currently set up are defaults by SharpSpring, but you can change these to anything that you want. So let me explain what this is. If someone puts in their first or last name into a form, just that, nothing else, they get a point. They also add their company name, another point. Title, street, city, state, all these things are individual points. Now down here, if they add a phone number or an email address, it's 5 points. Why? Because that's a deeper point of contact. Getting their electronic connections is much more important than getting their physical address. And the SharpSpring default is 5 points each. And of course, you can change that if you feel that putting a phone number is worth 10 points, or if an email address is only worth 3 points. If you think that somebody putting in their company is important, can up that. Or if their website is important to you, you can add some points there. It doesn't really matter what the point system is because everybody's going to be graded in the same way. In other words, we're not setting a point value system for one client and a different point value system for another client. What we've set up here, if somebody puts in their name, their company name, website, phone number, and email, they've scored themselves 22 points. Now let's continue on. Engagement. These are points earned by engaging with you electronically. Someone visits your website off of an email, that's a point. Now this says if a tracked page for a campaign is visited. So what's that mean? If you have a web page that is specifically used in a campaign and it's being tracked, that's more valuable than just, say, somebody visiting your homepage. And we'll get into campaigns later. Over here is if a form is completed. So what that means is if somebody puts in their first name, their website, and their email, and they submit a form, well, the form isn't completed, but still valuable information. But if every line in the form is completed, they get additional points, because what that says is they're more engaged with you. For each email click, meaning they open up an email and click on a link inside of it, that's 5 points. For each media view, it's 1 point. Now, a media view could be a video on a landing page, or it could be a white paper that you've written about some specific information that someone downloaded. Now, media can either be super valuable or super not valuable. If you have a tire store and you have a piece of media that is all about how to buy the right tire, well, you should score that media a lot higher. Because if someone's watching it, then they're much more minded to be buying a tire. If instead the media is about the history of tires in America, that's really 1 point. There's no greater likelihood that someone's going to buy a tire if they just watch the history of tires. Now, here is where you can put in specific pages. So let's say that you have a sales page and you add that in there. Somebody who visits a sales page and looks at it, they're a lot more likely that they're going to buy. So I would definitely up that to 10 points. You can add as many pages and lead score as many pages as you like. Now, we talked about media before. This is about specific media. So up here, if someone just views any media, they get 1 point. But down here, like I was talking, if somebody watches a video about buying the right tire, you want to put that link right in there, the link to the media, and score that pretty high. And again, you can add as many pieces of media and score them any way that you wish. So maybe you add a very high score to somebody watching a video about buying tires, but maybe have a little bit of a lower score if the video is about the tire industry and new tires being made. Boy, you got to really love tires to have that many videos. Now, here's fit. This is all about keying in on very specific leads. So for instance, if I was going after technology companies and I had a field in a form that was an industry field, and I was looking specifically for, say, medical startups, I might just have the word medical. And over here, instead of equals, I'm going to have contains, because I want to find anybody who's in the medical industry who's filling out my form with some reference to medical. I have some hot new piece of software that I want to sell to that industry, so it's really important when someone puts that word into that form. So I'm going to give that a very high score. Much more likely that I'll be able to sell these people the software than, say, someone from the electronics industry. Now down here, this is lead score decay. What that means is that someone may fill out all these points and have a very high lead score, but maybe they did that 6 months ago. Now they could be ranked the highest lead score, but if that score is 6 months old, it's unlikely that they're going to buy. I need to reach out to them in a very different way, reconnecting with them, re-nurturing them, getting them back. But I don't want to approach them as if they're ready to buy. Clearly they aren't. So lead score decay is now set up where in 9 weeks, it will decay by half. In other words, somebody who has a 30-point lead score will be dropped down to 15. And this gives us a time frame in which scores are accrued. In other words, if over a 6-month period, someone is scoring 3 points here, 5 points there, 1 point here, and over a long period of time, they accrue a high lead score, they aren't really a motivated client. They've just sort of hung around a long time. So what this says is that when somebody is inactive for 6 months and they become active again, after a 6-month period, they aren't accruing more lead scores. Their score drops down and they begin to accrue points. So with all that said, back up here, you're determining what a high lead score is to you. And how do you know this? You don't really until you've been working with the system for a while, until you've sent out a number of emails and watched interaction. You'll get a sense of how your clients, your potential clients, interact with you. What's a high lead score for one company could be a very low lead score for another, and certainly vice versa. So let's say in my case, anything higher than a 55 is a really great lead score. So I'm going to move this slider down here to 55, and then it'll show me how many clients I have at 55 and how many I have over. Now let's say I've been doing this for a while. I'm getting better at marketing automation, and suddenly my scores start jumping. People are really engaged with me. Well, now 55 isn't really giving me an accurate indication of somebody who's truly engaged, so I might need to bump that up to like 110. But this gives me an instant visual representation of who's truly engaged with me and who isn't. I can see how well I'm doing in engaging my potential customers by looking at this line. So that's lead scoring. Now we're going to cover visitor IDs. First thing is visitor ID settings. So we're going to go to the silhouette, go to settings. Visitor ID is under tracking, and there it is. So lots of check boxes. As you can see, I have them all checked. In the beginning of your marketing automation experience, you definitely want to check everything. Right now, we want to bring in and connect with as many people as possible. As we start drilling down and sending out more specific emails and segmenting our clients, then we can be a little more specific in who we're trying to reach. But right now, let's try to grab everyone. So you want to click all levels up here. Let's say it's several months into this, and you recognize that the people who are really good buyers for your product are mid-management people. Whatever it is that you're selling, they really like buying it. Executives, not so much. Managers, maybe. We might include them. But it's the mid-managers who seem to be really connected to what you're selling. So in that way, we're setting the system up to go after the people who are more likely to buy. But again, let's stick with all levels right now. Important contacts, same similar type of thing. This is more about the industry that you're trying to attract. Engineering, finance, human resources, legal, marketing. And in this, who in engineering do you want to reach? Software engineering, web development, maybe not those, but chemical engineering. And maybe finance and human resource isn't of interest to you at all. Marketing automation is essentially a giant research experiment. As you put information out there and as people respond to it, you're going to see who your big buyers are. But for now, we want to reach everybody. So you want to go in here and go through the hassle of clicking every one of these. And now we've got carpal tunnel syndrome. Okay, so that's what you want to do in terms of setting up your important contacts. Oh, and one more thing. Make sure that whenever you make any changes, you go down here and click Save Settings. Now this tab, Important Pages. Now this is different than lead scoring. When we look at the visitor IDs in just a moment, you're going to see how it does differ. So we want to know visually which of our contacts are going to the pages on a website that are important to us. So for instance, if I had a page, a sales page that was just thebigtimegroup.com/sales, I would just have to put in /sales. Now I'm going to give this a color because you'll see that when somebody is visiting this page, it's going to color code it. So I can tell visually who is visiting my sales page. If I have more than one site set up on SharpSpring, I can select each site and just make any notes here. And when I click this, it just logged in that page, as you can see right there. So I can put in as many pages as I like and assign each of them a different color. If I run out of colors here, I can just go in here and manually put in a web color. That code right there is called hexadecimal, and you can do any Google search on web colors or hex colors, and you'll find this like on Wikipedia. So if I wanted maroon, I could just copy that and paste it right in, and I have a maroon color. So that's how to add important pages to your visitor ID settings. Also on this are blacklisted items. So let's say that you're getting visits from a company in Malaysia and they're just spending 5 seconds on your homepage and then leaving, and they're doing that every day. Well, clearly that's just a robot out there looking for specific information. It's trolling you. So you can grab that URL and just stick it right there and then click Add Domain. If also you see that there's somebody with an IP address who is trolling you, not really doing anything other than just bouncing on and off your website, you can put their IP address in there and click Add Domain. This is also really helpful you should put your IP address in there as well, because when you visit your website, you don't want to track yourself. And that's visitor ID settings. Now let's take a look at visitor IDs. For this, we go up to Contacts and go down to Visitor ID. Now you can see that they've had some interaction. It looks like Telepac Communications has been very busy on their website. So this allows us to see how our contacts, people that we know, are interacting with us, and it also allows us to see companies that aren't in our contacts and how they're interacting with us. So let's take a look at Telepacific Communications. They've had 18 visits and they've looked at almost 450 pages. Now, SharpSpring is connected with a company called ZoomInfo, and ZoomInfo does a lot of internet research. So we essentially have an internet research company at our fingertips that allows us to know things about the companies visiting us, like their website, where they're located, how many employees they have, what their general annual revenue is. When we scroll down, we can see what they or someone in that company has been doing. Never be too interested in how long people spend on your homepage. There's nothing really that they learn about you or that indicates that they're a buyer when they're on your homepage. However, these pages tell a much different story. Somebody spent 13 minutes on the Women's Golf Day event. Someone else looked at, or perhaps the same person looked at, a ladies' night at the range. So getting an indication here that probably a woman was looking at this website. Now, unfortunately, we can't get the actual name of the person who was looking at the website. As we scroll down, we click Show More. Now, this visit was on March 9th. We can look at the visit on March 7th. We can see how much time they spent on each page. Certainly someone is very interested in the events that they're having. And you see this little I. Room rates was added as an important page in the visitor ID setup. So we know specifically that somebody looked at this page, spent a little time on it. 3 minutes in internet time is a long time. So it seems like they could be a very motivated buyer. See what happened on March 3rd, March 2nd, on and on and on. There was a lot of activity from this company. So who looked at the page? Well, we don't know that. But what we can do is go up here and click on Get Contacts. Now, we don't know for sure that Tony here is the one who looked, but this system was able to grab his name. You'll see in some other instances, we'll have their email address, we'll have their phone number, but for this company, we can only get their name. So I could click Convert to Lead, and that would put Tony as a contact in our system. So if Tony did actually show up, let's say he went to a landing page, let's say Tony put in his information into a form, Tony signed up for more information about Joshua Desert Retreats. Well, the system's going to put 2 and 2 together and know that Tony was the one that was doing all of this looking around, and that he's probably a very motivated buyer. Well, we can check out some of the other people. Someone in Fullerton, and this is at California State University in Fullerton. Well, they're looking at a lot of important pages. Not spending a terrific amount of time on it, but they are looking. Now, if we click Get Contacts here, you see now we have a lot more information. We have Melinda, and we have Robert. We have Melinda's full email address. We have her phone number. Same thing with Robert. So where did all of this information come from? It came from Zoom Info. Again, this is a research company that is connected with SharpSpring, so we have access to a tremendous amount of information. Again, we don't know specifically if any of these people were the ones that looked at the site, but it's a pretty good bet that at least one of them were. We also see over here that UCLA, someone in UCLA also visited. So a way to leverage this information might be to create a campaign where we're giving special discounts to educators and people who work for universities. Doing that using Get Contacts, we're more likely to hit the person who was the one who looked at the website. Now, I want to show you what happened when I chose Get Contacts and converted some leads. So I did that with Frontier Communications and got a couple of anonymous visitors. So I can scroll down here and try to find them, or just click in there and do a search. And there we go. Let's take a look at this guy. So here's someone that came to the site, spent a pretty good amount of time there. 4 visits, looked at 18 pages, has a decent lead score, 22. Let's see what he did. Spent 5 minutes on the Sunny Ranch page. Spent a lot of time during this visit. Spent an hour on the site. And yeah, it's a possibility that he just could have been on that page and walked away from the computer. But the fact that he went there and visited all of these sites, that does mean something. Now, what do we know about this person? Well, we know that this is an anonymous visitor, but we definitely like them to be a known visitor. How do we do that? Well, one thing that we do know about this person is we have their IP address. In other words, we know where you live. So let's say that we put a form on the website, and maybe we put the form right here on the Sunny Ranch page. And the form lists the person's first name, last name, just your standard form. And this person fills out the form and clicks Submit. Well, this system is going to know that it came from that IP address. It's going to put 2 and 2 together and turn this anonymous visitor into a known visitor. We're going to get the name that the person put into the form. Now, with 18 pages, not a great lead, but if it was like 300 pages, we definitely want to try to capture that person. Let's see what we know about this person currently. So I'm going to click right here on their name, and now it's taken us into the contact manager. So to be clear, we have left the visitor ID area and we're now in the contact manager. So if I clicked on the contact manager, we would also find this person right there. Here we are. So what do we know about them? We know that they work for Frontier Communications. So if we were going to put a form on, we might also have a place for employer. Let's say that this guy filled out the form. And then back here at Visitor ID, we go to Frontier Communications. We click Get Contacts. Now we load up these other people as well and convert them to leads. We could send a special email just to Frontier and say, Bob Smith, whoever the anonymous visitor turns out to be, Bob Smith booked a room at Joshua Desert Retreats. We're doing a friends and family special. If you're a friend of Bob Smith, we'd love to have you visit us too. In this way, we're leveraging the experience that one person at Frontier Communications has, starting a little internal dialogue in the office about this cool place that Bob is going to, and the fact that other people in the office got an offer. We may develop an entirely new community of people who want to visit Joshua Desert Retreats. So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go back and look at the anonymous visitor. Here you can see we don't know too much about him, just that he works for Frontier. We have the website. We have the IP address that we saw on the previous page. The other thing is that you can click Life of Lead. And again, this is in the Contact Manager. And we can see all the times that this person interacted with us. Now, if he fills out that form and gives us his name, there's also going to be a little dot here with an image of a form. Then we start sending him emails, and he looks at the email. He goes to a landing page. He looks at a piece of media. All those things are going to be dots on this line. We're going to see every way he's interacted with us, be able to click on those and learn about what he did. So if there's an email, we click on the email and we see the exact email that we sent him. Over here at memberships, well, we haven't sent out any emails. He hasn't looked at any media. We don't have any workflows going. But we do know, if we click on device, the type of device he used to visit the website. This is valuable because in the system trying to determine who is who, we learn a little bit about someone and we start to draw together everything that we know. Maybe we don't have his IP address, but he fills out a form with his name and that he works for Frontier, and he does so using this same device. The system is going to put two and two together and suggest that the person who fills out the form might be this guy. We can see another anonymous visitor. He visited the site using an iPhone. Also good information, because if we find that most people are visiting the site using a mobile device, maybe we want to reconfigure the site a bit to be more mobile device friendly. Bottom line, you can't go wrong with more information. And to be clear, if you go up to Contacts, Contact Manager, anybody here who's interacted with you, you can click on their name, see the life of the lead, see the memberships, if he's contacted us, if he's come on the website, we can see what device. But we haven't sent out a campaign yet, so there's no reason that any of these people on the contact list currently would have any interaction with us. The other thing that the system does is it lets us know a little more about the person, gives us their LinkedIn and Facebook profiles. So you can click on those and get to know a little more about the person. This is super valuable if somebody has been visiting the site a lot. They're bringing their whole family. They're staying there for a week. You want to perhaps know a little more about them. Click on their Facebook profile. See the name of Justin's kids and wife. Send them an email. Hey, hope that Bobby and Steve and Jan enjoy your visit at Joshua Desert Retreats. Let's go to automation. We're going to go to the automation tab and drag down to tasks. So a task is an action that someone takes which triggers a workflow. When someone opens an email and clicks on a link that says learn more, that's a trigger. Now a series of events is going to happen. Rather than explain it, let me show you how this works. We go to Options, New Task, and we'll name the task. Since there's already a test, we'll call this one Test 2. Now tasks are broken down into triggers and filters, as it says right there. A trigger is something that a recipient does that makes a workflow begin. For instance, they fill out a form. If you think of like a pinball machine, the trigger would be pulling the little plunger back and letting it go. That puts the ball on the table, and then it bounces around and scores all kinds of points. So the trigger is just that. It is the initiation. So here is where we add triggers. You can also click and add a filter. A filter fine-tunes and narrows who and what initiates a workflow. Let's say you're focusing specifically on people in the medical field. You only want this series of offers to be going to them. So let me show you how this works. Let's say when someone fills out a form, I want to be notified. I also want them to immediately get a thank you email for filling out the form. And I want to add them to a specific list. Let's see how to do that. So it says add the trigger, and we have when a contact fills out the form. And we could have it fills out a form. We could have them fill out any form. There's a litany of things that could trigger a workflow. But we want them to fill out a specific form. And we just click in here, and it shows us all the forms that we have created. I'm going to use Big Time Test. Now, I don't care when they fill out the form. It could be during business hours, during non-business hours, doesn't matter. So I'm going to leave that alone, and then I'm going to click Add the Rule. So we have now told the system what initiates the workflow. This trigger is that somebody fills out a form. Now let's see about filtering. So I'm going to click Add the Filter. And over here, I'm going to select Has the Field, and we'll put first name, containing Dan. I only want to work with people named Dan. But I'm okay with Dan, Daniel, Danny, so I don't want it to be exactly Dan. It can just be including Dan. And I'm going to click Add Rule, which is actually a filter. So now when a contact fills out the form, the Big Time Test, add anytime, and also has the first name Dan, this is now the trigger I want. Now, this drop down up here says when any or when all, meaning that if you had a lot of different triggers here and it didn't matter which of those triggers happened, you could do when any. However, if it was important to you that every one of those triggers needed to happen, for instance, they fill out a form, they include their industry in that form, they have the first name Dan. If you only want the workflow to be triggered when all of those things happen, then you want all. If it doesn't matter which one of those, click when any. And we're going to go down here and click Save Changes. So now the task of test 2 has a trigger established. Now let's get a workflow attached to it. We click New Workflow, and we'll call this Test 2. And we'll click these two. I'll go into this one at a later date. But we want to make the workflow available in the Contact Manager, and we want to make this workflow repeatable. In other words, if the person filled out the form again, that they would again be put into the workflow. So the first thing that we're going to do is do 0 minutes after the workflow begins. In other words, the person fills out the form and their name is Dan. We want to send an email. Now, we would have already had to have set up an email thanking them for filling out the form. I don't have that, but I'll just put in that as a placeholder. And right now I have it set to immediately. It's going to send that thank you, but it could click that, and then it would only send it during regular business hours. So we're going to click Add Action, and here we go. Someone completes that trigger, they now get a thank you email. But we want to do a couple more things. And if you're wondering why would you wait on sending someone an email, well, let's say that the trigger wasn't that they filled out the form. Let's say that the trigger was that they didn't fill out the form. Maybe they just put in their first name and then they abandoned it. We don't want to send them an email right away hounding them, hey, how come you didn't fill out the form? We might give it a week. And then send an email reminding them of the offer that they were filling out the form for and encouraging them to follow through on it. But right now we're not doing that. Next, we're going to click on this drop down and we're going to use notification. And as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that a workflow can begin. So we're going to send a notification to me. And I also want to get a text message as well. And I'm going to click Add Action. So now person fills out a form, they get a thank you, I get a text. Last thing is we want to add them to a list. Click on this, Add to List. And I'm going to send them to Test dynamic and add action. So very simply, we now have the 3 pieces of the workflow that will commence when the person fills out the form and triggers it. Save changes. Now, if we want to look at this, we can just go back under automation, go to tasks, and there it is, test 2. Click on that and it takes us right back to the triggers. If we want to see the workflow, go up to automation and click workflow, and there's test 2, the workflow that we just created. We can very simply add more pieces to the workflow. So bottom line, you set up a trigger, someone completes the trigger, and it activates the workflow. So that's all for today. We'll see you next time.